human beings are not these machines that you can just move around here and there and take you and put you over there and take me and put me over there and do this to us and that to us, and then we'll go this way or that way, right? We have our values, we have a spiritual nature to us, we have a human nature to us that wants to interact with other people, that wants to create value. And when you break into that system and try to control it, it doesn't work as well, because it really takes away people's humanity as well as their choices. It takes away sort of who you are as a human being.
Are you sure you're an economist? No. It was only a couple of years ago when Jared Polis took office that Colorado had about the best unemployment situation in the country. It was always number 1, 2, or 3 for best employment, or should we say the lowest unemployment. After COVID, we dropped down to 4th worst. Now we've crawled our way back up to about 35th in the nation, but we're still, my God, we're still in the bottom third of what's happened out here. It's really awful. Paul Prentice is one of our great senior fellows and economists. I want to talk about it kind of nationally, but I really want to focus in on Colorado. It seems as though something like 27 other states have ended this policy of paying people not to work. First of all, the role of unemployment insurance is to help people in between when they lose a job. And you can't argue that the job loss we saw in the last year was all government mandated. When the government says you can't go to work, they really should help you out, shouldn't they?
I think they should. That's the role of kind of bridging that gap. But keep in mind, unemployment insurance means paying in expectation of an actuarial outflow. But it wasn't really insurance. It was just printing money right. and just throwing it at people. So maybe that wasn't so good after all.
I don't know. Hang on a second. So unemployment insurance, you have to do by law. And so you look at your pay stub, and you'll see that part of it goes to unemployment insurance. What people don't get is your employer matches that. So that's all money that would have gone to you. So imagine doubling it. And that kind of makes sense in that you're paying for like fire insurance or life insurance. Some people are going to get hit, and everybody pulls their money in and helps out those people that get hit. This thing was such a national shutdown, or in the state of Colorado, a Polis-led shutdown, that if the government is going to tell you you can't work, they have a responsibility to pay you, don't they? Is that an unfair thing to say?
Well, it sounds very fair, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But you have to keep... an old saying from the Soviet Union is that we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. Income has to be earned from production. And, what
do you mean by that? I know that's a simple thing to say, but no, it doesn't. There are people who are making just as much money, if not more, and they're not producing anything. So you're wrong.
They're getting money, but they're not earning income.
I'm sure that really hurts them.
That's the big difference between money supply kind of thinking and income being generated through a productive economy.
Help me understand that.
Productive economy. Sure. If I was to, for example, just pay you $100 an hour to watch Jeopardy reruns, and I wrote that up as a job description, and the federal government said, here's your job, and this is what I'm going to pay you, that would show up in the GDP accounts as employment and income.
Right.
But nothing's been produced.
So I haven't
produced.
Given anything.
Right.
Rather, if you paid me $10 an hour to dig holes, at the end of the day, we'd be digging holes and laying down pipe or whatever, putting in sprinkler systems, and there would be something to show for it.
Right. And then that exchange that would occur from that when you go to take the income that you earned from your labor and then exchange it for something else. That's the trade that happens throughout the economy all the time. That's how income and wealth is generated and produced. It's not produced just from printing money.
All right. Will you agree? I'm going to keep pushing you on this. Would you agree that what we saw last year was, I hate to use the overused word, unprecedented, but it really was unprecedented. In my lifetime, I've never seen a governor say, you can't go to work, you're under house arrest, you are staying there, and nobody's going to go to work. and restaurants cannot work, service industry cannot work. We're going to pay you to stay home. It's not like I have the chance then to go dig holes or serve tables because it's against the rules. And if you're looking for the economic model, me starving also doesn't help the economic picture. So getting these benefits must be a good thing.
Well, if you think of it that way, I suppose it is good for you, but is it good for the economy as a whole? The problem is not so much that. The problem is the lockdown to begin with. It's shutting down production, because it's production that must create the income that then goes through the spending stream. When you cut that link between the economy and production, you go out to spend the $100 that somebody printed to give you. What did you do in return for that? You're making an exchange that somewhere along the line had to be stolen from somebody, didn't it?
Would it be a fair analogy to say something like this? Yes, you can get paid for doing nothing, but you're going to have to produce even more in the future to pay it back. In other words, I can take a cash advance out on my credit card and I can pay the little monthly amount, but sooner or later, goons are going to come if I don't pay it all back. At some point, I'm actually going to have to make money to pay that plus some. Fair?
So that's fair. We did not pay for this. The money coming to people not to work did not come from floating government bonds in the debt market to be paid back later. It came from the printing presses. Okay.
What do you mean? I know, all right, that sounds real simple.
Yeah.
But there are going to be some people listening going, wait a second. What? So either they borrow the money or they print the money. It still just kind of comes out. There's a real difference between money that comes from the sky, it's just printed up or it's typed into a computer at the Fed,
Yes.
and now there's more of it, versus an official IOU, which is, here's $1 billion. You can print $1 billion, but there's an IOU that China has now that we have to pay them back. One is monetization, the other one's debt.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what's been happening is the Federal Reserve has been buying up that debt, that government debt, thereby monetizing the debt. Okay, so that is what we're seeing now in anybody watching this that's gone to buy anything in the last 3 to 6 months can see the inflation at work. And
there is
almost
no inflation. I don't know what you're talking about. I've been told there's no inflation. So I want to get to the $300.
Yeah.
Most governors stopped this supplemental $300 a week extra. Our governor refuses to do so. And I can't understand why, while we've got huge unemployment now in Colorado, and every state that has cut this $300 gift to not work has seen unemployment drop considerably. Now, my layman's point of view is when you pay people not to work, they're happy to oblige, and when you stop paying them, they might have to get a job.
That's called people respond to incentives. And it's a primary economic principle. It's like the prime driver of all economic thinking is that people respond to incentives. And so if you incentivize them not to work, most people will not. If you incentivize them to work, most people will. There's always some at the margin that will make a different decision. But the longer and the more you pay people not to work, the longer you keep this production system broken. Okay? You keep the system broken of producing goods and services, hiring labor to produce the goods and services. Those states that have reduced or eliminated their unemployment benefits have actually reported businesses now having floods of applications. Whereas here in Colorado, we can't find workers. Why? Because we're paying them to stay home.
So not only when I go out to eat, which is way too often, but being a divorced guy, I eat out. I'm finding that the prices are going up and the service is going down. And I always try to thank the people who are there. I try not to, don't take it out on your waiter. Yeah. He actually showed up for work. It shows the difference between people who could make just as much money not working, but still they come to work. And that's heroic. I really mean that. It is heroic. They can probably make the same amount of money staying home, but they're not. Now, my sense is there's a reward for these people in that they're already in the job market, they're already getting references, and as things grow, they will have an easier time getting more jobs, better jobs, whatever. When these employment benefits end, the extra employment benefits end at the end of September, which is going to be sooner than we think, there are going to be a lot of people perhaps looking for a job all at once, and they might not be available.
So what you mentioned is that people work for many reasons. There is psychic income, just the pleasure of producing and working and seeing your fellow man, and some people do that more than others. There's the monetary direct income earned from that, but there's also then what you're building a career at, right? You're building your resume, you're getting on the job experience, you're ready for the next raise, the next promotion, ready to move on to the next level into the economy. Most people that are in those service industries are not there forever. Those are typically entry-level jobs, and you want to build your way out of it.
Yeah, but nobody wants to, nobody has a career as a busboy, all right? Nobody wants to go, I want to be the best busboy there is. I got a master's in busboyism, and I've got it down. I understand, I love what I do for a living. I'm a very lucky individual, and I feel terrible for people who hate their jobs. I just don't know how, I don't know why you do something you hate, but I understand sometimes you have to do things you hate. But yeah, one of the things the left gets wrong is they think it's all about money. That when a person takes a job, it's because you pay him a penny more than this guy, as if we're automatons. Being able to walk to work might be something that's important to you. Flexibility because you want to take care of your kids. The mission of whatever the work is might be what gets you. The career path. Or sometimes you just want to get out of your parents' basement and get some kick around money. People value things differently at different levels. That seems to be the difference between we free marketers and those people who are Keynesians or big progressive government folks. They think they know what the incentive is for everybody.
Yeah, they tend to see, John, the economy as some sort of a machine or a system that they can then manipulate, pull this lever here, and then they get a result over there, instead of understanding that the economy is us. It's just how we go about our lives. It's how we produce and trade with each other and create wealth. It's how, you go to a Starbucks store and you give them $4, they give you a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden they say thank you and you say thank you because why? That trade has made both actors better off, voluntary trade. That's production, and that's trade, and that's income earned and income spent.
That very example.
But that's, do you want a caramel macchiato or do you want a mocha? What do you want? And is it the same thing at midnight as it is at 7 a.m.? Those kind of subjective values that the Austrian School of Economics thinks about are so important, and that's why the planners get it all wrong. It can never work, because to plan perfectly, they'd have to know what every single person wants all the time when they want it.
But if you build a model,
subjective value.
If you build a model that all people want is more money, that's all we want is, I make $10 an hour, I want to make $11. That is the only thing. Then it's a switch. It's this. Your machine could be a pretty simple machine that if you want to change the economy. And those of us who know that humanity is not a switch, which is so wild because I see people on the left talking about diversity and acceptance and tolerance, but they don't seem to tolerate that people want to do things for different reasons and get their utility. See, nice. I'm learning my economic. Get their utility from different things. All right. Yeah. If you were Governor Polis, let's bring it down to politics. If you were Governor Polis and you're looking at the unemployment situation here in Colorado, what actions would you take? First, give me the things that he can do, and then give me kind of a magic wand if the legislature would allow him. What should he do?
I think I'm not sure of the legislative end of this. I believe he has the authority to roll back the additional incentive pay to stay home.
Yep.
So that's number one. He could
stop that immediately, like 27 other governors have done.
Absolutely. Because every one of those states is picking up employment. And as I said, they're getting reports from the businesses that there's more and more people now applying for the jobs. Why? Because the market is going to reward them more than them staying at home on unemployment. But you mentioned something in your talk there that
it was a tirade. We call it a tirade.
Well, no, but it's important that people understand that human beings are not these machines that you can just move around here and there and take you and put you over there and take me and put me over there and do this to us and that to us, and then we'll go this way or that way, right? We have our values. We have a spiritual nature to us. We have a human nature to us that wants to interact with other people, that wants to create value. And when you break into that system and try to control it, it doesn't work as well because it really takes away people's humanity as well as their choices. It takes away sort of who you are as a human being.
Are you sure you're an economist? No economist talks about humanity and spirituality. No, they just talk graphs.
I think one of my favorite economists once said that to be a really good economist, you have to be much more than just an economist. You have to be a historian, a philosopher, a theologian, a mathematician, and anybody that's just an economist is likely to do a great deal of damage.
What else should our governor be doing? Yes, I agree, $300 supplemental, but it's not like if he does that, this all goes away.
No. But there's more. There's getting back to the idea of production creates income.
Right.
Well, how much of our oil and gas production did we shut down? And then all of the economic chain that goes up from that production. So why don't we roll back that?
So in other words, he's killing the oil economy. He's been doing things to kill the ranching and agriculture economy. It was great to see Wall Street Journal turning Colorado into an international story, the one place that you cannot hire from if you want to tell a worker. They got 300 companies now have made it an official policy.
Yes.
PETA, people for eating tasty animals, people for the ethical treatment of animals, said, we're going to hire somebody. You can live anywhere on the planet, but in the state of Colorado, because of one of the laws he signed, which was basically transparency that takes away the ability for an employer to negotiate somebody's wage.
Yeah. The old signs in Boston from the early 1900s, Irish need not apply.
Coloradans need not.
Companies, Coloradans
the new
need
Irish.
not apply.
Coloradans
right.
need not apply.
Need not apply.
I never thought about that. I don't like that one. We ought to do that.
Maybe we'll get a bumper sticker for that.
So many other things. You talked about an economist having to look at other things. The cost of creation goes up here, not just because the cost of employment is going up, including that he's now had the minimum wage. If you live in other place around the state, now cities can increase the minimum wage. Not to mention he's been raising taxes because he calls them fees, so he doesn't have to ask. That means it's less money in the productive sector of the economy. But I think the one that's creeping up that people don't quite see is going to be energy. And the new energy economy, which utilities love because utilities are guaranteed a rate of return, a guaranteed profit. So they want as many things that they have to build, whatever it is, a coal plant, a nuke plant, a windmill. So they just want to build things, then they can charge us not only to build them, but then to operate them. And so our energy bills are going skyrocketing, and it's just the start. All these things make it hard to employ somebody because of the cost of, you said Starbucks. Starbucks needs electricity and natural gas and all the rest. They need employment, which is going up. And they need the raw materials, which is now going up. The coffee beans are going up in price.
Yeah, so the whole supply chain,
right.
Inflation throughout the supply chain, and even breaking the supply chain with regulations. So you can only do this, but then you can't do that. And then you have to do this instead, solar panels or whatever it happens to be, coal-fired electric vehicles.
I love the environment. Here's my coal-fired car. All right, let me ask you this. We're talking about things that are happening in Colorado. Switch it to the national side, too, because Colorado doesn't have the authority to print money, They don't have the authority to go into debt. We have a balanced budget amendment in Colorado. If we're going to go into debt, you have to ask the people, supposedly. How much of this unemployment problem is federal, or the inflation problem? How much is that federal versus?
Boy, that's a good question. I don't know how you'd really parse it out. I know that based on the Fiscal Policy Center here at the Independence Institute, our budget is actually flush
Colorado's
with cash.
budget.
Yeah.
Colorado's budget is overflowing with money.
Yes.
How is this possible after we just had this recessionary period of everything is shut down? All right,
so injection of fiat currency via the Fed. What do you think?
So in other words, yes, our economy took a nosedive, but the Feds made up play money, and they gave it to all the states, and now we've got all this play money.
Yeah. And I've just looking back into history, you can't see any place where there's been a good final economic outcome to massive monetary stimulus. You don't have to go back that far to look at Brazil or Venezuela earlier, or back into the 1900s to see Austria and Germany, or back to the Romans to see when they melted down their coins and shaved them off a little bit and made slightly smaller coins and thought they'd have more wealth because they could print more or coin more coins. So, it's been tried 1,000 times, and it never has worked because it can't work.
Let me bring up this topic and noodle it with me. Inertia is stickier than I've ever thought. I know some hardcore, Austrian types, gold fanatic types who said, right after Nixon took us off the gold standard, that's it. The economy is going to blow up and melt down. Now, we did have the huge stagflation. We had things that were bad. But I really thought that George W.'s printing up money was going to cause real inflation. Then I thought Obama certainly would. So I've been waiting. Been waiting 16 years for this, or 12 years for this. And now Trump did his stimulus, which was outlandish, and now Biden is doing his. So it's getting worse and worse and worse. When does the big inflation come? I know there's inflation now. Are you convinced that this is monetary inflation caused by all this money being printed, or is this just we shut down an economy? It's going to take a while to get all the channels open and the supply chains going and the ports working and chopping the trees down all the way to make paper. It's going to take time. So there's going to be shortages. The chip shortage for cars is kind of a perfect example. Well, let's stop making chips because the economy's bad. Now we need them.
So that's what the Federal Reserve believes, and the monetary authorities believe, that it's a temporary situation, that their massive printing of money has nothing to do with the inflation, that's just a supply chain disruption inflation. But the supply chain disruption of prices through that, if it hits an umbrella without additional money supply on top of that to provide the cover for it, it can't work. You can't just keep pushing prices up unless there's more money to pay for that system. So it's both. And eventually the money supply problem will far outweigh the supply chain problem. Supply chains can be fixed. They will be fixed.
You are
because people wake up and they want to get better. That's the economy.
You are.
But the monetary
you and your old-fashioned notions. Listen, Keynes proved, John Maynard Keynes proved that when we have these crises, that we can prime the pump. We do this, and the stock market just hit another all-time high. We still have roofs over our heads. It's working. So I don't know what you doomsdayers are all about, but let me tell you, times are fat and happy. What are you complaining about?
So it's not so much doomsday. People, if they're reasonably free, will find a way to work within a system, any given system, right? So the economy will continue. It'll work. But it's harder to work when there's 10, 15, probably 20% inflation coming at us. And that's a reasonable forecast given the numbers that I see now.
Time out. 10, 15, 20% inflation.
Yeah, higher than Carter levels.
You think this is going to be higher than Carter levels? Yes. And that was pushing, what, 12%, wasn't it?
Well, there were some months where if you annualized the monthly rate, it would be like 17% or so. And that was in the background of a fairly stagnant economy. And you mentioned Keynes again, but he said if you print the money, you could then have more employment. But when I started my career as a macroeconomist, believing in Keynes, because I was trained that way in the university, we saw the federal government printing all this money, and unemployment was rising along with it instead of falling. It was not this Phillips curve trade-off. It was actually causing more unemployment with the inflation. So it's completely against the Keynesian theory. So I disagree with you to say that Keynes was right.
Keynes is always right. You can just keep printing,
Lord Keynes, not Saint Keynes.
Was he a lord?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. So you're like a former smoker. You know, they are the most religiously anti-smoking. You used to be a Keynesian. That is, you wanted loose monetary policy to keep the machine expanding. As long as everything is expanding, things are good. Didn't Keynes say, when asked what happens in the long term, he said, 50 years we'll all be dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my kids hopefully won't be dead, and I'm worried about them. What's the fix?
So, at this point in time, the fix for the state or for the nation?
Start with the state and then tell me. Well, you gave me a couple for the state, so.
Okay. So nationally, we need more of what we used to call supply-side economic policies. Get the production system moving again. Stop this massive printing. Just put a brake on the massive printing. Deregulate the economy. More tax cuts. More stimulus more incentives for capital gains. Incentives for working and producing. And that's the way out. It's almost become a classic policy response for those of us that believe in free markets. And we don't just believe in free markets because of faith, it's because we've studied them and we see that they work. We understand the logic and the data. So what do? You free up the markets. You free up the markets by cutting capital gains taxes, cutting taxes on labor, by deregulating, and by stopping the massive printing of money, which just masks a lot of other economic problems.
Hey, Paul, thanks for this. I could go on forever. Appreciate all the work you do.
Oh, it's been fun. Appreciate you, John.
Okay. If you enjoyed that conversation, by all means, click one of these other great programs. We have the best conversations with the most fascinating Coloradans. And subscribe to our channel. Just click down below and hit that little bell button, too. You don't want to miss a single show.